Welcome to the Raising Cinephiles podcast, a show about passing on your love of cinema to the next generation. I'm your host, Jessica Kantor, and I have worked in all facets of the entertainment industry for the last 20 years, and recently became a mom. Always remember that myself and guests are speaking from personal experience and not giving parenting advice. Let's go ahead and dive into the episode. Today's episode is a little different. We have done a whopping 48 interviews with amazing folks who've shared their insights on raising movie lovers and really how they themselves fell in love with cinema. And with so much wisdom that they shared with us and such inspiration, I thought it would be fun to take a step back and revisit some of these episodes and talk through what has really inspired me with my son. The first topic I want to embark on is the power of shared experiences. Why is watching movies with kids so special? Guest after guest emphasize the power of this shared experiences. And movies really become a bridge between us and our children. Often are conversation starters and create shared memories between us. I can't tell you how many guests said they watched E.T. in the theater for the first time. Shout out to you, Jeffrey Abramson. And Star Wars in the theaters the first time. That was Jeff's, where he thought the Star Troopers were coming out of the screen. And I think the impression of cinema on a young child is pretty awestruck. I've mentioned on previous podcast, I threw my son's second birthday at a movie theater and got a print of the red balloon, and watching the kids just look up and stare at the screen in wonder and get so into the movie, yelling at the movie theater and, oh my gosh, they're flying away. And oh, it was just so fun to watch. And then another perspective that I think around this topic that was really interesting was the conversation with Emily Ziff Griffin about how she and her daughter will watch cinema and use it as a bridge between the two of them to discuss some of the social issues that are going to come in her teen years. So with a preteen daughter watching teenagers and maybe some slightly advanced topics, but topics that are going to be there before she knows it, and she'll be really more prepared for that because of these conversations. It's so much easier to discuss somewhat embarrassing topics with your kids when it's not about them. It's about these characters, and watching Riverdale and saying, did you think that it was right the way that boy treated that girl, or the way the couple started dating? And do you think the parents were right in that situation? Do they handle that appropriately? You learn a lot about how your kids are seeing the world and where they might need some support in the years to come. The next topic that I think is really interesting that came up a lot was when to show kids what film. Do I hold? If I hold for too long, will they not like it anymore? And there seems to be a sweet spot, like The Wizard of Oz. If I show it to a child too young, and a lot of people had very vivid memories watching The Wizard of Oz. Some of it was because they were moved, and feelings make good memories, and some of it was because they were so scared from the flying monkeys and the witches. And I personally remember being very scared from that movie. I feel like The Wizard of Oz came up in a lot of conversations with Annie Weissman from Apple TV's Physical and Stephanie Lang. They both discussed The Wizard of Oz, and they both discussed Grease, which is another topic to discuss because it's a lot of films we discuss on the podcast didn't age. And Annie really shared something interesting about how her kids just didn't like the ending of Grease, that Sandy changed herself for a man, and how they hated watching them smoke cigarettes, and all of the things we thought was cool and sexy and like empowering were really actually the opposite. When today's age maybe would double down on her persona of wanting to be kind and not dangerous, feeling to get the guy and make the guy change or not change, just realize you aren't right for each other. But I really thought it was interesting that at least her children, and I think it's likely a lot of children, no longer accept some of the social injustices that we accepted so willingly watching these movies because there wasn't any other conversation for anything else yet. And it's really interesting to think about it that way. Another thing that I love about watching movies is the spark of curiosity that it brings in children. My conversation with B.S. Keita, who shows her daughter literally everything, she would have these conversations, and sometimes it would happen months after she saw the movie, putting together pieces that might have or be a thought was going over her head, but actually she was just working it out in her own mind and trying to find the question she wanted to ask. And family movie night and how to pick those movies that everyone in the family will sit down and watch. And I love how Emily Best talked about doing that with her 2 kids and being able to start watching movies with her son beyond the typical Disney canon. And then, of course, Lily, who's been on the podcast twice and probably will be more times with her son, who is just so curious about the craft of filmmaking and wants to watch movies with her and discuss how they're made. And similarly, Eric Robinson talked about creating almost like a film school for his son to start going through different directors and introducing him to the different aspects and components of cinema. That was another theme of parents, of adults whose parents exposed them to international cinema, whether they didn't grow up in America or they grew up in America and got to see Truffaut and different concepts of cinema. So Jordan Gallant talked a lot about seeing art film, and Luca De Laurentiis actually was the opposite. Like it was American films, which is how he learned his English when he came over from Italy. So I think that was really interesting to see how our guests were exposed to cinema really helped shape their own taste, which is now being passed forward to their children. And I can't forget that some kids actually just don't like movies, and we have to accept that when that happens. And they might get into cinema later on their own terms and finding their own way in. But there are kids who that's just not how they want to consume their entertainment. They want video games or YouTube. And I really hope that's not what happens with my son. But right now he really likes movies. And it's definitely movies around the topics that he's interested in. Like right now there's an obsession in our household around trains, choo-choo trains. And so I play the little engine that could, and sometimes we'll have it on the background while we're playing choo-choo and building tracks and coming up with different ways to go around the tracks if we do bridges. And it's been really fun. And actually, I think I got into it a little more than I expected to. All right, I think the other thing that was really interesting is how cinema opens up our point of view to the world, how it introduces diversity, other perspectives, other ways of living, so that culture doesn't feel like a monolith of your own community. And that's one of the things I love about film. It's something I spoke with a lot across many of the guests, and how it can inspire different careers. Vanessa Simmons and I talked about Clueless, and that inspired her, one of her fashion brands that she started. And Jeffrey Abramson talked about European cinema. Emily Best talked about the first time she saw an art house film and realized there was more to cinema, more to the world, the way we see the world, the way we express ourselves in the world. And I'm trying to think, we had so many great conversations. I loved Katie Strickland and how she talked about acting out films she saw on the farm she lived, and Color Purple, and it was her both playing and also making sense of some of the cinema she was seeing. And same with the Nelms brothers, who just traveled, watched everything together, and created their own language of cinema. And it didn't occur to them that they could make movies until they were a bit older in college or just out of college. Yeah, so I have been really enjoying these conversations. And in doing so, I I've introduced my son to The Good Dinosaur, which was a little scary, but he loved it. And he also really loved Monsters, Inc. when we were dealing with a fear of monsters. It definitely empowered him to realize maybe they aren't so scary, or he can have a relationship with monsters. We actually even designed a monster using AI, and I sent out the designs to be turned into a stuffed animal using a company called Budsy. And so we have our own little character. Maybe he'll have his own stories that we can make up together. But right now, Monster, which is his name, Happy Monster, sits downstairs and makes sure no other monsters can come in the house. And that's been really effective. Yeah, and then I guess that brings to the power of imagination and play that comes out of these movies. Katie Strickland, as I mentioned, and playing choo-choo trains with the movies, and all of it is quite interesting. And then finally, the point that I would love to end this short episode on is the quality over quantity and some wisdom around screen time. Yelda Oels offered a powerful takeaway. Screen time isn't the enemy. It's what kids watch that matters. Be mindful of the content your kids consume. Fill their cinematic diet with high quality films and TV, which inspire, educate, and entertain. And I love this. And I also feel like my son doesn't always want the TV on or film on. He wants to play, or he'll get inspired watching and then want to turn it off and continue in his own world. I really hope this is helpful, and that maybe you want to check out some of the previous episodes or revisit if you want to continue to be inspired with films. Every episode lists some recommendations of films to show your kid at different ages. And I would love to know in the comments or across social media what are the favorite ways you share movies with your family. And until next time, I hope you have an amazing time watching movies. See you soon. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. New episodes release every Wednesday. And leave a comment and let me know which movie you think I should show my son. Until next time, take care.